The cantina was full of noise and smoke. Aliens from different worlds sat at tables, drinking and talking loudly. Their voices mixed together in strange sounds. Some clicked, some growled, and others sang like birds. The air smelled of exotic drinks and alien food. Though in the darkest corner of the room, an old warrior sat alone. His name was Vextal, and his body was covered in scars from many battles. His hard shell was cracked in places, and one of his forearms hung slightly crooked from an old injury. He stared into his drink, lost in dark memories. At the main bar, 3 young soldiers from the planet Altair were celebrating. Their skin was blue and shiny like crystal, and they wore bright new uniforms. They had just won their first real battle, and they wanted everyone to know about it. 50 enemy ships destroyed in one day, shouted the first soldier, his voice loud and proud. We showed those pirates what real fighting looks like. They ran away like scared children when they saw our weapons, laughed the second one, raising his glass high. No one can stand against the Altarian fleet. The third soldier nodded eagerly. Our commanders say we're the best fighters in this part of the galaxy. We're going to bring peace to every system. Other aliens in the cantina smiled and nodded politely, but many of the older ones just looked sad. They had heard young soldiers talk like this before. They knew what war really meant, and it was not something to celebrate. Vextal heard every word, and his scarred face twisted with something that might have been pain. His large compound eyes, which could see in all directions at once, focused on the young soldiers. Very slowly, he began to laugh, but it was not a happy laugh. It was cold and bitter, like the sound of breaking glass. The laugh cut through all the other noise in the cantina, and suddenly, everyone went quiet. All eyes turned to the dark corner where the old warrior sat. You think you know about fighting, Vextal said, his voice rough and deep. You destroyed 50 ships and call yourselves warriors. He stood up slowly, his full height making him tower over everyone else in the room. Tell me, young ones, have you ever fought humans? The word humans seemed to suck all the warmth out of the room. Some aliens whispered nervously to each other. Others moved their chairs back, as if trying to get away from something dangerous. The first soldier looked confused. Humans, you mean those pink creatures from the Sol system? But they were defeated long ago. Everyone knows that story. They are weak and primitive. Weak. Vextal's laugh became even more bitter. Primitive. He began walking toward their table, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silent room. Is that what they teach you in your schools? Is that what your leaders tell you? The young soldiers looked at each other nervously. They had never heard anyone talk about humans like this before. In all their history lessons, humans were just another conquered species, no different from hundreds of others. The war against the humans ended 30 years ago, the second soldier said, trying to sound confident. Our combined fleets defeated them easily. They surrendered without much of a fight. Vextal reached their table and placed one of his scarred hands on its surface. The metal groaned under his weight. Surrendered, he repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. Is that what you call it? He looked at each of the young soldiers, in turn, his alien eyes seeming to look right through them. I was there, young ones. I fought in the human wars. I saw what really happened, and I am here to tell you that everything you think you know is a lie. The cantina was now completely silent. Even the automated serving machines had stopped their humming. Every creature in the room was listening, waiting to hear what the old warrior would say next. Sit down, Vextal commanded, pointing to the empty chairs around his table. All of you, if you want to call yourselves warriors, then you need to learn what war really means. You need to hear about the humans. The young Altarians looked at each other uncertainly, but something in the old warrior's voice made them obey. They left their celebration and walked slowly to his dark corner table. Other aliens in the cantina began moving closer to, forming a circle around them. I will tell you about the siege of Kepler-4 for 2B, Vextal said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. I will tell you about a human named Hyanwu and how he taught me that humans do not fight wars the way other species do. They do not fight to win territory or resources or glory. He paused, looking at each face around the table. Humans fight to make their enemies afraid. They fight to plant nightmares in their opponents' minds that will last forever, and they are very, very good at it. The old warrior sat down heavily, his battle-scarred body creaking like old metal. When I am done telling you this story, you will understand why I sit alone in dark corners. You will understand why I drink until I cannot remember, and you will understand why the galaxy's greatest victory was actually its most terrible defeat. Vextal picked up his glass and drank deeply before starting his story. The liquid burned his throat, but it helped push away the memories that always came with this tale. Around him, the young soldiers and other aliens waited quietly, their eyes fixed on his scarred face. Kepler-4 for to be was supposed to be easy, Vextal began, his voice steady but quiet. Just a mining colony on a small planet. 30,000 humans lived there, mostly workers and their families. They dug metals out of rocks and sent them to other worlds. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. He traced a long scar on his arm with one finger. Our fleet had 200 warships, big ones, with enough firepower to destroy entire cities. The humans had no military ships, no weapons, no defenses. Our commanders said we would finish the job in a few hours and be home for dinner. One of the young Altarians shifted in his seat, but something went wrong. Everything went wrong, Vextel said with a bitter smile. The first sign was when we tried to contact the colony's leaders. Usually when we show up with a big fleet, the local government surrenders immediately. They know they cannot win, so they give up and try to save lives. He paused, remembering, but the humans did not surrender. A man named Hyanwu answered our call. He was just a mining supervisor, not a soldier or a politician. He looked at our fleet of 200 ships and smiled. The old warrior's voice grew darker. Hyanwu said, "Thank you for coming so far to visit us. We have been preparing something special for you." Then he cut off the communication. Our commanders thought he was crazy or stupid. Vextel stood up and walked to the cantina's window, looking out at the stars. We sent down our first wave of soldiers, 10,000 of our best troops, with heavy weapons and armor. They landed near the main mining complex and began their attack. He turned back to face his audience. That was when we learned that humans do not think like other species. While we were traveling to their world, they were not building walls or hiding in bunkers. They were turning their entire planet into a weapon. The aliens around the table leaned forward, drawn into the story. Despite their fear, the mining charges they used to break rocks became bombs. The big machines they used to dig metals became war vehicles. Even their children knew how to make deadly weapons from pieces of scrap metal they found lying around. Vextel's voice became quieter, more frightening. But the worst part was not their clever weapons or their traps. It was how they acted while they fought. Other species fight because they have to. They are scared, angry, desperate. But humans were different. He sat back down, his compound eyes reflecting the cantina's dim lights. Humans fought like they were having fun. They smiled while they killed our soldiers. They laughed when they were hurt or dying. Hyanwu's daughter was a little girl named Yunji, maybe 12 years old. She threw explosive devices at our tanks while singing children's songs. One of the listening aliens made a small sound of horror. A child fighting in a war. Not just fighting, Vextel corrected. Winning. That little girl destroyed 3 of our heavy combat vehicles before we even knew she was there. And when our soldiers finally cornered her, she looked up at them with those dark human eyes and said, "My daddy says you're scared of us now. Are you scared?" The old warrior touched a deep scar across his chest. After 3 days of fighting, we stopped sending down new troops. After a week, we stopped counting our dead soldiers. The humans had not just defended their colony, they had turned it into a place where we came to die. He drank again, his hands shaking slightly. Our commanders decided to bomb the colony from space, destroy everything and everyone, just to make the killing stop. But even that did not work the way we expected. Vextel looked directly at the young Altarians when we started bombing. The humans came out of their hiding places. They stood in the open, looking up at our ships in the sky, and they waved at us. They waved goodbye, like we were friends leaving after a nice visit. The cantina was completely silent now. Even the background sounds of the space station seemed muted. Hyanwu was in the last group we saw before the final bombing run. He was badly hurt, bleeding from many wounds, barely able to stand. But he looked up at our cameras and smiled that terrible human smile. Vextel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He said, "Tell your people that we were just miners and farmers and children. We were not soldiers, we were not warriors. Tell them to wait until they meet our real military. Tell them we were just the warm-up." The old warrior finished his drink and set the glass down hard on the table. That was 30 years ago. I still wake up screaming from dreams about that little girl and her father, and every night, I wonder what the real human soldiers must be like, if their miners could do that to us. He looked around the table at the frightened faces. Now you know why we do not talk about the human wars. Now you know why that victory feels like a defeat. Vextel ordered another drink, his hands still shaking from the memories of the mining colony. The young aliens around his table had grown pale, their earlier confidence completely gone. Other creatures in the cantina had moved closer, forming a larger circle to hear the old warrior's stories. The warning that Hyanwu gave us haunted my dreams for months. Vextel continued, his voice heavy with old pain. But I thought maybe he was just trying to scare us. Maybe the humans were not as dangerous as they seemed. Maybe we had just been unlucky. He laughed bitterly. Then came the incident at prison ship Morden, and I learned that luck had nothing to do with it. The old warrior paused, gathering his thoughts. Around him, the aliens waited in tense silence. 6 months after the colony siege, we captured a human strike team during a raid on one of our supply depots. 7 humans, all soldiers this time, not miners or farmers. Our commanders were excited. Finally, we would have real human prisoners to study and question. Vextel traced another scar on his neck, this one thin and precise like a blade mark. The leader of the human team was a woman named Jinnah. She was small and quiet, with short black hair and calm dark eyes. When we put her in chains, She did not fight or scream or beg like other prisoners usually do. She just looked around the prison ship like she was visiting a museum. One of the young Altarians asked nervously, "What did she do?" "Nothing," Vextal replied. "That was what made it so terrifying." For 3 weeks, Gina said nothing. She answered no questions. She made no demands. She just sat in her cell, watching and waiting. Our interrogators thought they had broken her spirit. The old warrior's compound eyes grew distant, as if he was seeing the past instead of the present. The other human prisoners seemed broken too. There was a man named Duhayan who cleaned the prison corridors every day without complaint. A woman called Sora who worked in the kitchen, preparing food for the guards. They all seemed defeated. Hopeless, he drank deeply before continuing. Our guards began to relax. The humans were quiet and obedient. They caused no trouble. They seemed to accept their fate as prisoners. We thought we had finally found humans who acted like normal, civilized beings. Vextal's voice grew quieter, more dangerous. Then one day Gina asked to speak with the ship's commander. It was the first time she had spoken in 3 weeks. The commander was curious, so he agreed to meet with her. The aliens around the table leaned forward, caught up in the story, despite their fear. When the commander arrived at her cell, Gina smiled, not the warm smile of a friend, but that cold human smile that makes your blood freeze in your veins. She looked at him through the bars and said, "Your ship is already dead. It just doesn't know it yet." One of the listening aliens whispered, "What did she mean?" The commander asked the same question. Vextal replied. Gina's smile grew wider. She said, "My friends and I have been students for 3 weeks. We have been learning about your ship, your people, your weaknesses. School is over now. Time for the final exam." The old warrior stood up and began pacing, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet cantina. That was when we realized the truth. The humans had not been broken or defeated. They had been planning. Duhayan had not just been cleaning the corridors. He had been mapping every air vent, every maintenance tunnel, every hidden passage in the ship. He stopped pacing and faced his audience. Sora had not just been cooking food. She had been studying our guard schedules, our shift changes, our daily routines. She knew exactly when and where every guard would be at any moment of the day or night. Vextal's voice became barely audible. The other humans had been learning too. One studied our weapons, another learned our computer systems. They had turned 3 weeks of imprisonment into 3 weeks of intelligence gathering. He touched the scar on his neck again. That night, the lights went out. Emergency power failed. Communication systems stopped working. In the darkness of our own ship, we could not see or talk to each other, but the humans could see us perfectly. The cantina was now completely silent except for Vextal's voice. They did not just escape from their cells, they hunted us through our own corridors like we were animals. They knew exactly where to find us, how to avoid our weapons, how to turn our own ship against us. His compound eyes fixed on the young Altarian. Sora found me in the command center. I was trying to restore power to the weapons systems. I never heard her coming. Suddenly, there was a blade at my throat, and her voice in my ear. Vextal's hand moved to his neck scar. She whispered, "This is what humans do to those who put us in cages. We learn everything about you, and then we use that knowledge to destroy. You remember this lesson, and spread the word to your people." He sat back down heavily. When the lights came back on, all 7 human prisoners were gone. Half our crew was dead or wounded. Our ship was crippled and drifting, and somewhere in space, Gina and her team were free, carrying all the secrets they had learned about our military. The old warrior finished his drink and looked around the table at the horrified faces. That was when I understood that humans do not see imprisonment as punishment. They see it as an opportunity to study their enemies from the inside. Vextal's hand shook as he reached for his drink. The glass was empty, but he held it anyway, staring into its bottom as if searching for answers to questions he did not want to ask. The cantina around him had grown cold and quiet. Even the air recycling systems seemed to whisper more softly, as if afraid to disturb the old warrior's memories. "There is one more story I must tell," Vextal said, his voice barely louder than a breath. "It is the worst story of all. The one that keeps me awake at night, drinking in dark corners, trying to forget what I have seen." He looked up at the frightened faces around his table. Young aliens who had come here celebrating victory now sat pale and trembling, their eyes wide with growing horror. It happened in the deep void, in a place we now call the Dead Sector. Our combined fleets had finally cornered the last human military ships. 50 human vessels against our 300. We thought it would be the final battle of the war. We thought we would finally end the human threat forever. Vextal set down his empty glass with shaking fingers. The human fleet was commanded by an admiral named Teho. He was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. When our ship surrounded his fleet, he sent us one final message. The old warrior's voice dropped to a whisper. Teho appeared on our screens, sitting calmly in his command chair. He looked at our massive fleet and smiled that terrible human smile. Then he said something that still haunts my dreams. One of the young Altarians leaned forward. "What did he say?" he said. "You will win today. Your weapons are stronger, your ships are faster, your numbers are greater. But victory against humans comes with a price that you do not understand yet. Every ship you destroy will keep fighting. Every human you kill will keep killing. We do not just die and disappear. We become eternal. Vextal began to pace again, his movements jerky and nervous. Our commanders laughed at his words. They thought he was just trying to frighten us with empty threats. They ordered the attack to begin. He stopped pacing and faced his audience. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was the most terrible fighting any of us had ever seen. The humans fought like demons, like creatures possessed by evil spirits. But in the end, our numbers won. All 50 human ships were destroyed. Every human died. The cantina was completely silent now. Other aliens had stopped their conversations to listen to the old warrior's tale. We celebrated our victory, continued. We thought the war was over. We thought we could finally go home and live in peace. We were wrong. His compound eyes reflected the dim lights like broken mirrors. 3 days later, our patrol ships started disappearing. One by one, they would vanish from our sensors without sending any distress calls. When we found the wreckage, there were no signs of what had attacked them. Vextal's voice became hollow, empty. Then we started finding pieces of the human ships. We had destroyed, but they were not floating dead in space like normal wreckage. They were moving, they were hunting. One of the listening aliens made a small sound of disbelief. How could destroyed ships still move? The humans had prepared for their defeat, Vextal explained. They had installed something they called ghost protocols in all their ships. When a vessel was destroyed, the computer systems would activate emergency programs. The wreckage would rebuild itself using pieces from other destroyed ships. He sat back down, his body sagging with exhaustion. But that was not the worst part. The ghost ships did not just attack randomly. They learned from every battle. They studied our tactics, our weaknesses, our patrol routes. They became smarter and more dangerous with each passing day. Vextal's voice cracked with emotion. One of the ghost ships had been a human transport vessel called the Minsu. It had been carrying civilian families, including many children. When it became a ghost ship, it kept broadcasting the voices of the dead children. He covered his face with his hands. It would hunt our ships while playing recordings of human children, singing lullabies and laughing. The sound of dead children's laughter echoing through space as our crews died one by one. The old warrior looked up with tears in his compound eyes. For 15 years, those ghost ships stalked our fleets across 3 star systems. They never stopped, never rested, never showed mercy. They hunted us like we were prey animals. He gestured toward the window, toward the darkness of space beyond. That sector is still quarantined today. No ships are allowed to enter. The ghost fleet is still out there, still hunting, still learning new ways to kill. Vextal's voice became barely audible. Sometimes, on quiet nights like this, you can still hear them on the deep space communication channels. The voices of dead human children, singing songs about death and vengeance. They broadcast on all frequencies, warning other species about what happens to those who make war against humanity. He stood up slowly, his scarred body trembling with old fear. Admiral Tejo was right. Humans do not just die. They become ghosts that haunt their enemies forever. And those ghosts are still out there, waiting in the dark between the stars. The cantina remained silent long after Vextal finished speaking. Everyone could feel the weight of his words. The terrible truth that victory against humans was just another form of defeat. The cantina had become a tomb of silence. No one spoke, no one moved, no one even seemed to breathe. The only sound was the distant hum of the space station's life support systems, and even that seemed muted and afraid. Vextal stood at the center of it all, his scarred form casting long shadows across the frightened faces of his audience. "You want to know why I sit alone?" Vextal said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years of nightmares. "You want to know why I drink until I cannot think? Why I hide in dark corners of forgotten stations? You think it is because I am a coward, because I am broken by war." He looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him. Young soldiers, old merchants, travelers from a dozen different worlds. All of them had stopped their lives to listen to his stories of human terror. "I am not broken by what I did in the war," Vextal continued. "I am broken by what I learned. By the truth that our leaders hide from the galaxy. By the lie that we tell ourselves every day to help us sleep at night." One of the young Altarians found his voice, though it shook as he spoke. "What truth? What lie?" Vextal smiled, but it was not a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who had seen too much, understood too much, and could never forget what he knew. "The lie is that we won the human wars," he said. "The truth is that we never fought the humans at all. We fought their miners, their farmers, their children, their prisoners. We never faced their real military. We never saw what they could do." When they were truly angry, he began walking slowly around the room, his footsteps echoing like a funeral march. "After the Ghost Fleet incident, our high command was desperate. They had lost thousands of ships to dead humans who refused to stay. Dead. They were ready to surrender, to admit defeat to a species they had thought was primitive and weak. Vextal stopped at the cantina's main window, looking out at the stars. That was when she came. Admiral Hidjin of the human fleet. She arrived at our capital world in a single small ship, with no weapons, no escorts, no protection. Just one human woman, coming to talk to the leaders of the galaxy's greatest military alliance. The old warrior's reflection in the window looked like a ghost himself, pale and haunted. Our leaders expected her to surrender. They expected her to beg for mercy, to ask for peace terms. Instead, she sat down at the negotiation table and made us an offer. He turned back to face the room. She said, "You have been fighting our civilians. For 30 years, you have killed our miners, our farmers, our children. You have learned what happens when you make ordinary humans angry. Now you have a choice." Vextal's voice dropped to a whisper. Hijin told our leaders that the real human military had been watching the entire war. They had been studying our tactics, our weapons, our strategies. They had been learning everything about us while we fought their civilians. One of the listening aliens asked, "What was the choice?" "Simple," Vextal replied. "We could let the humans retreat to their home system and never bother them again. In return, they would stop the ghost fleets from hunting us. They would call off their civilian fighters. They would give us peace." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Or we could continue the war, and they would show us what their real soldiers could do. They would show us what happened when professional human warriors, not just angry civilians, decided to fight back." The cantina remained silent, but Vextal could see the understanding dawning in the eyes around him. The horrible realization of what the human wars had really been. "Our leaders chose peace," Vextal said. "They signed the treaty that sent the humans back to their home system. They agreed never to enter human space again. And in return, the ghost fleets went silent. The civilian fighters stopped their attacks. The war ended." He sat back down at his table, suddenly looking very old and very tired. But it was not a victory, it was a ceasefire. The humans did not surrender. They did not admit defeat. They simply went home to prepare for the next war. Vextal picked up his empty glass and stared into it. Right now, in the Sol system, the humans are building new ships, training new soldiers, developing new weapons. They are teaching their children about the species that killed their miners and farmers. They are preparing for the day when someone is foolish enough to threaten them. Again, he looked up at the young Altarians who had started the evening boasting about their military victories. "Every night, I dream about little Yonji, the miner's daughter who smiled at me while throwing bombs at our tanks. I dream about her dark eyes and her fearless voice. And I wonder what her children will be like when they grow up." Vextal stood up slowly and walked toward the cantina's exit. At the doorway, he paused and turned back one final time. "The galaxy calls it the Great Peace," he said. 30 years without major wars. 30 years of prosperity and cooperation. But I know the truth. The peace exists because the humans allow it. They are out there, watching us, waiting, and if we ever threaten them again, they will show us what real terror looks like." The door closed behind him, leaving the cantina in stunned silence. The young soldiers who had come to celebrate their victory now sat pale and shaken, understanding finally that their greatest enemy was not conquered, but simply sleeping.